script anything out, so I'm nervous.
Just start talking. As long as you know when to stop.
Antoine Lang. He is en route. Welcome, everyone, to the debut episode of the Brews and News program, a production of the Savannah Morning News and savannahnow.com. We're down here on a Tuesday afternoon at Service Brewing on Indian Street, downtown Savannah. The good folks of Service were kind enough to host us, and we'll partake of their product here once we get done debating here. Brews and News is going to be a semi-monthly program where we pick a topic of local community interest and bring in some subject matter experts and have a discussion. For the first one, because it's election season, we had 2 weeks from today is the general election. We're going to focus on election topics. And I'm pleased to be joined today by Rebecca Rolfus of the League of Women Voters of Coastal Georgia, and Stephen Plunk of the Young Republicans. And on his way, and joining us soon, is Antoine Lang, who is the head of Savannah JCs and the past chairman of the Young Democrats of Savannah. So looking forward to a good discussion today. Let's start our discussion with the League of Women Voters. Of course, they have a big event coming up tomorrow night, a forum between Buddy Carter and Lisa Ring, the two candidates for Georgia's 1st Congressional District. And we could talk a little bit about that forum first, but can you just kind of give us an overview of what the League of Women Voters is and what they do?
Sure. League of Women Voters is 98 years old. We were founded when the 19th Amendment passed, giving women the right to vote. So 50% of the population had never voted, never registered to vote, didn't know how to vote, didn't know who to vote for. And so the whole idea was to educate those voters, and that has remained the idea. So the organization is national, has local chapters. We're supposed to be one of the most effective grassroots organizations in the country, and we are completely nonpartisan. So we don't back candidates, we don't back parties. We educate voters about the issues and let them make up their own minds. The chapter in Coastal Georgia started 2 years ago after the last election, basically because a group of us, were very dismayed at the disappearance of civil discourse where politics is concerned. And so we wanted to be part of bringing that back, a lively debate of important issues in a civil manner, which brings me to tomorrow night's event.
Right.
So we don't have debates, we have forums.
Right.
The candidates don't go at each other. They respond to the attendees' questions about the issues and get to have their say. It's very timed, so nobody dominates the conversation. The event is sold out, but it will be streaming on savannahnow.com and on WTOC.com. So if you didn't get a ticket, you can still attend, so to speak, and be part of the event.
Let's talk a little bit about that format. Obviously, they'll take questions, they'll respond. Is there going to be an opportunity for the other to respond to what their opponent said about it?
Most of the questions, you can direct a question to just one candidate, but most of the questions are directed to both of them. So they each will have about a minute and a half to respond, and then it would flip over to the other side. What do you have to say on that same subject? So they're not debating each other, but they're giving their different views on whatever the question was.
Okay.
Yeah.
The League of Women Voters, of course, it's not just for women anymore, right?
No. We haven't been just for women in a long time. We do have men. It's astonishing. But a lot of people just gravitate to that nonpartisan voter engagement, voter education message, and so join regardless of gender.
Right. Now, what's very interesting about the League of Women Voters is the website has a voter's guide on it, which does a very good job of laying out the issues, the candidates. They shared some of their information with us for use before the primaries. Of course, now we've got some for the general election. Can you kind of direct people where to go and what they might find on that site?
As the author of that behemoth of a voter's guide, I thank you for the endorsement. Yes, every single candidate who ran in the primary was listed, and now every single remaining candidate who will be in the election on November 6th. So it is on our website, which is lwvcga.org, and it is very prominent on the homepage, Voters Guide. You can click on it, and then it has links to each and every one of the offices that are up for grabs, and also the ballot resolutions and amendments.
Mm-hmm. And if you're looking for it on the web and you Google it, make sure you put League of Women Voters of Coastal Georgia, because otherwise you might have trouble
Correct.
finding it. So it's in the comments section, according to Producer Zach. So
yeah.
That's all really good stuff. Let's go ahead and transition into the election. And I'm gonna start with Stephen since he's here. We're still waiting on Antoine, but the gubernatorial election, of course, is between Brian Kemp, the Republican, and Stacey Abrams, the Democrat. We've seen a lot, particularly in recent weeks, of back and forth between the candidates. You would expect that coming this close to the election. But I guess what I'd like to ask you to do, Stephen, is initially kind of talk about Brian Kemp and his platform and maybe where he needs to appeal to voters in these last 2 weeks to close it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think anyone expected anything less than what we've seen. A lot of back and forth from both of the candidates. It looks, according to the polls, like things are kind of neck and neck. I think maybe the average has Brian ahead by maybe 1 or 2 points. But it's been, I think, the race that has shaped up to be what everyone thought it was going to be. As for Brian Kemp, I think everyone has gotten to know him pretty well over the course of the campaign. His commercials have become famous or infamous, depending on how you want to look at it. He came back from a pretty large deficit in the primary to beat Casey Cagle, and ended up crushing him by quite a bit, which was, I think, kind of a surprise, after trailing him in the first round. And so now he's facing Stacey Abrams, and I think pretty much all onlookers would agree that it's a pretty wide disparity between the two candidates. They both represent kind of a maybe not far version of their party's platform, but certainly strong conservatives versus someone who's running as a pretty staunch liberal, not running as a moderate, either one of them. So it's definitely a base election, I'll say that, and it's going to be coming down to turnout. I think both sides are just trying to get their voters turned out, which will make it interesting to see what independent voters do, because I think they're kind of being ignored in this race. Both sides are focused on throwing red meat, and so however independents break will, I think, determine it. Yeah,
that's interesting to me, and Rebecca, I encourage you to kind of weigh on this as well. Is it seemed like around Labor Day, when the election first started to pick up, they both seemed like they were kind of appealing to the middle.
Right.
And then the polls come out, and they show them pretty much equal, with 8 to 10% of people in the middle. And at that point, you're wondering, okay, how do they slice off that? Mm-hmm. But instead, it seems like they've said, okay, well, I'm just going to stick with that 40%, 45%, or whatever 40% that was behind me, and try to rally them and hopefully get them enthused enough for others to come out. Is that surprising, and do we expect any kind of turn in that in these last couple of weeks?
Well, and you're right that coming out of a primary, I think candidates almost always try and make a turn towards the middle. They usually took a hard left or right turn to win over their primary voters, and then coming out of that, they start appealing to the middle. And you're right, you did see that a little bit at first, but the farther on we've gone, I think both sides have kind of doubled down on what got them this far, and so it'll be interesting.
Right. I heard Stacey Abrams speak back during the primary season, and she said at that point that this was her intention, that she was not going to make the same mistake that Michelle Nunn's made.
Right.
She was not going to try to, as she put it, convert atheists into Baptists. She was going to try to get Baptists to go to church. Yeah. She was trying to appeal to the voters whom she knew were her base, her natural base. And then if she could get others, either because they were turned off by her opponent or because they just seemed to gravitate to her message, then she felt like she would have a critical mass and could win. But I know this is the campaign that she at least said was she intended to run.
Yeah.
I don't know about Kemp.
I think you're right. I think if we had a Stacey Evans, Casey Cagle race, things would look a lot different right now. I think both of those candidates were positioning themselves to compete for the middle, but the voters went with Brian Kemp and Stacey Abrams, and I think this is the way it was always kind of destined to shape out, where both candidates are kind of going after their base, want to maximize turnout, get people as excited as possible, which, I think nationwide this midterm is all about excitement. A lot has been made of the blue wave, certainly, and how fired up Democrats are. But I think a lot of polls have showed that if Democrats are at 100%, Republicans are right behind them. I think this is one of the most high excitement level midterms we've had in years, I think. Antoine, do you want to jump in?
Well,
welcome,
guys,
Antoine.
I feel welcome to be here, and I'm glad
See ya.
to. How are you? Thank you all for having me here, and I really appreciate the opportunity. Second, I do concur that this is a great opportunity for people to get involved and people to get engaged in the political process. And at the same time, we are seeing record numbers of individuals early voting and participating, period. I think young people on both sides are very engaged. They're listening and they're paying attention to what's the main issues that are going on, whether it's healthcare, whether it's crime or things like that. So I think this is going to be an exciting opportunity for everyone to understand and get more engaged.
Right. We're going to get deeper into the issues here in a little bit, but let's start. First of all, I want to get some bios on you guys because I skipped that part. I'm a first timer here, so you'll have to forgive me. But Stephen is a University of Georgia grad, a political science degree. He's a long-time resident, and he worked for Jack Kingston when Jack ran for the Senate some years ago. And he is the current chairman of the Savannah Young Republicans, which I did say, and a vendor sales rep with Old Town Trolley. Antoine is the president of the Savannah JCs, the former chairman of the Savannah Young Democrats. He was elected in May to the Chatham County Board of Elections and will take that spot next spring. And given all the angst that we have about the election system, I'm sure will be very interesting post when he takes it, and we can come back to that too. And I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're currently pursuing a master's in public administration at Savannah State. So,
And I serve in the military.
And served in the
Georgia
military.
National Guard.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for coming. We just touched on that voter in the election and voting, and that obviously has become a big issue, particularly in the last week and a half. And I'm somewhat interested because there seems to be some conspiracy theories that seem to be flying back and forth, and I'm wondering I'm going to ask this to Stephen and Antoine, how do you think this, I'm going to call it what I think it is, which is fear-mongering on both sides. How does that play out, and how does that impact? You mentioned there's a lot of people coming out to vote early. Is that getting people out to vote, and will it motivate people either to not vote or that weren't going to vote to come out?
Certainly, I think, like we said, this is a base election, and that's kind of tends to be the ugly side of the base election, as you get a little more of the fear-mongering, a little more of the below-the-belt punches. Certainly, I think this kind of started, it was Stacey Abrams' line of attack against Brian Kemp, effective because he is the Secretary of State. He does oversee elections, so it was, kind of a soft underbelly that she could go after, accusing him of targeting certain demographics that tend to vote Democratic and either cutting down on polling stations or cutting back on their registration, flagging them for whatever reason. I think that now that people have kind of done their homework on it, the Secretary of State's office brought in an independent reviewer who I think just filed their report yesterday. It's become pretty clear that anyone that has been flagged can vote. That's something that I think could potentially have hurt her turnout, actually, is if some of these people get worried and see that their voter registration has been flagged and they don't turn out to vote. Everyone can vote, even if you've had your voter registration flagged. If you're one of the 47,000 or 53,000, there's been different numbers flying around. Brian Kemp entered a legal agreement saying that everyone who has had their voter registration flagged because of some kind of exact match issue can vote in the 2018 elections. No one is being denied their right to vote, even if they had an issue with their Social Security, an issue with their proving their place of residence or their citizenship. Everyone can still come to the polls and vote. They will just be asked to, correct it on the form once they get there. So it was a bit of an issue, and I think it is probably driving turnout. It definitely gets her side excited, but as these things do, they kind of play both ways, and I think that the Republican side may feel that these attacks have been unfair, trying to hit a man that they see has done a good job the past 8 to 10 years as Secretary of State, and it might fire up the other side too. Antoine?
So, a couple of things. some of the things that you said are correct in terms of individuals being able to cast provisional ballots when they get to their polling place. Those individuals who may have been flagged can still vote. So that is important to understand, that you still have the opportunity to vote and that you will not be turned away. And if you are turned away, please contact your local Board of Elections immediately. And you can contact me if you need to. My number is 912-547-4627. And if there's something that needs to be rectified, we will make sure that that is rectified.
I think we'll get that in the comments, too.
The other thing is, everyone does not vote based on logic. A vast majority of individuals vote based on emotions. And I think that any political consultant or any media consultant will know that anytime you have some great sound bites, it can get people either energized or it can put some fear into people. And I think that whether you look at, for instance, today when we're talking about Stacey Abrams and Brian Kemp, you look on one hand in Randolph County, you had 7 polling places attempting to be closed out of 9. And then you look at the attack against Brian for that, and then you look at the attack against Stacey when it comes to the flag burning today. I think that it's important that we always remain, if we all can, civilized and respectful to one another, no matter the difficulties in party affiliations, no matter the challenges and how you see people's views. I think we must always respect one another. I think that's one of the things that the young Democrats and young Republicans have always been able to do, is respect one another's opinions, while at the same time engage and learn from one another. So I think that if we're going to move forward, we have to be respectful. We both understand the tactics that are sometimes used in order to energize one's base. I just got elected, so I understand how to appropriately say what issues are facing individuals and make it current to them. And ultimately, as an elected official, you want people to get out and vote. And so you're going to look for issues that are real, and you're going to make sure that you let them know what's going on. Now, whether it energizes them or not, it's up to them. But there are many things that I do not like that is happening, whether you talk about the tactics or not, but they're happening. And the thing that we must do as individuals who maybe vote based on the issues, we have to always remain focused on that which is at hand. Who can best articulate, who can best work for, and I'm not saying that Brian can't work for or Stacey can't work for. I think both of them have great qualities. I think both of them have outstanding backgrounds, and both of them have great and outstanding resumes. I just so happen to be a Democrat, and my friend here just so happens to be a Republican, and there are many philosophical differences that we have that just won't align the same way, but be respectful in all ways.
Right.
Absolutely.
I want to seize on something that Stephen opened the door here and talked about, Brian Kemp being the Secretary of State. It looks like right now that there's a good possibility we're going to have a runoff, and Brian made the decision not to step down as Secretary of State, which I think if he could probably go back and do it all over again,
I think he should have. He should have, even though it is not against the law for the Secretary of State to run or to run for office and sustain the position. I think that the individual who is in charge of the elections, who oversees the elections, just as if one of us board members on the Board of Elections wanted to run for another office and it wasn't an election year, we would have to step down from the position. But at the same token, I think that it would just be a wise move upon Brian Kemp to have stepped down.
Yeah.
Now, he hasn't. That's okay. It's not against the law.
No, but if this thing is close,
I think
it's as close as everybody thinks
I am going to predict that it is going to be a very close race. We're looking at the numbers, and the numbers are higher than they were in 2014. I'm seeing the comparisons over and over again.
Triple for early voting.
Much more. Wow. I think it was around the number of 24,000 in 2014 for early voting, and right now it's 69,000. I think that we're going to have some great numbers. People who have not voted before are voting.
Certainly.
And I think it's kind of the same wave that we saw in 2008.
Right. We started with Stephen kind of introducing Brian Kemp, who he is, what he stands for, what he thinks Brian needs to do in these last 2 weeks in terms of running up to November the 6th. How about from the Stacey Abrams angle? What do you see along those lines?
Well, Stacey, I've known her for quite some time. I interned with the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus for more than 2 years, and she was the leader of the House, or the minority leader of the House. And I watched her as she would negotiate and work with people at the House under the dome. And she was someone that could be a team player. A lot of people don't truly understand how things happen at the Capitol. It's not always. Most times, the media may put out things that it's very partisan, but at the end of the day, I would say 85 to 90% of the issues are bipartisan, and those things are not always cast in the brightest light. So I would say she did a lot in concern to that, and making sure that she worked across the aisle. In her background, as we all know, she graduated from Yale. She graduated from a great college in Atlanta, Georgia, Spelman College. Her background and her resume speaks for itself. And I think that also, from a video that I have seen, I think I saw it a couple of days ago, of unfortunately someone was in the crowd who had different views from her, was a Republican, and was trying to put her on the spot for her taxes. And the way she handled it was very graceful. Wasn't very rambunctious or anything like that. So seeing someone in times of controversy, in times of a moment when you could probably act out of character or be upset and be mad and yell and all those things, I think she handled herself very well, and I think she'll do the same as governor.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring that up, and Rebecca, maybe you can speak to this as well. I've been very taken from when that issue first came up in the primary about her taxes, and she's been very straightforward about, hey, this is why it happened. I have worked out an arrangement, a payment plan with the IRS. People can argue, well, she's got that payment plan, but yet she's funding her campaign with this and that. Bottom line is she's done what she needs to do, and I think she really parlayed that in the primary to her advantage.
Right.
Now, it really hasn't played that much in a general election. I think probably because Kemp has his own issues with the funding of the agribusiness up in Kentucky, but from a nonpartisan outsider's view, how do you think she has played that?
I think she's played it beautifully because, as you say, she's been completely transparent about it. She's been completely upfront about it. She's not trying to gloss over it or tell a better story than it is. I think it comes from her background. She has faced a lot of adversity in her life, and so compared to some of that, this probably seems easy. She knows, you referred before to young people voting. One of the things that we see at the League is what is being called the rising American electorate. The rising American electorate, people this age, could absolutely change this election. They can swing it however they want to, as long as they turn out to vote. And that particular demographic is extremely media savvy, and they know how to get information. They know how to get the information they need, and they know who to trust and who to believe. They know when they're being sold a bill of goods. I mean, they grew up with advertising, right? And so Stacey being able to just calmly and logically answer a direct question. Yes, it happened. Yes, this is why it happened, and yes, this is what I've done about it. End of issue. And so it just never blew up the way it could have if she had tried to gloss over it or pretend that it had not happened. As you say, in the general election, I am from Kentucky, so I'm very familiar with Brian Kemp's agribusiness in Kentucky. He has not confronted that question in the same way, so I don't know how he would handle it.
Yeah, but it's interesting you talking about that, and I'm probably going to lose everybody when I talk about this, but I remember a scene in the movie Patriot Games with Harrison Ford, and he played Jack Ryan from the Tom Clancy novels, and he was advising the President of the United States, and the President of the United States' friend or compadre was murdered by a drug cartel on the boat. So the media was making a big deal of how were you associated with this guy who's obviously associated with the drug runners. And they're all like, distance yourself, distance yourself, distance yourself. And Jack Ryan's like, no. When they ask the question, say, he's a friend. And when they ask for clarification, you say he's a close friend. And you give them nowhere to go.
Right.
And I think that's kind of what Abrams has kind of done, is by wrapping her arms around it and staying true to her message. And now, since I've told that story, I completely lost my train of thought.
Well, we do have a question.
Yeah, we do have a question, and the question is probably something I'm going to have to answer. So the question was, what about Ted Metz? So we talked about the runoff, the potential for runoff earlier. The person that would potentially force that runoff would be Ted Metz, the Libertarian candidate. The way elections work in Georgia is you have to have 50% of the vote plus one in order to win. So if a candidate like Ted Metz were to siphon off 2 or 3% of the vote, and somebody's got to help me with the math here, then Brian Kemp gets 46%, and Stacey Abrams, let's just say neither Abrams nor Kemp gets 50%, right, because Metz is siphoning off enough votes. Then we have to come back 4 weeks later for a runoff election. So who is Ted Metz? And this kind of gets to the problem I have with Ted Metz is we haven't heard anything from Ted Metz really since this whole election campaign started. For whatever reason, I understand he's a Libertarian candidate. They're a third party. They're not going to get the press that the Democrats and Republicans do. But he seems to me has been particularly absent. So I'm going to give you a little bit of his bio, because why not? So he was an Air Force pilot and was in the Boy Scouts.
Mm-hmm. Eagle Scout.
Yeah, Eagle Scouts. He is an entrepreneur with the satellite telecommunications industry. A chemist at the University of Georgia, so he's a fellow Bulldog. He's semi-retired and worked for Ron Paul, and he is fighting to restore the rule of law and to stop the corporate takeover of the government. So there's Ted Metz in a nutshell.
Yep.
Obviously, he's not going to win, but from you guys' perspective, what kind of difference, or let's just ask it really directly. If we get to a runoff, the question with a runoff always is turnout. Can these two candidates continue that momentum to get their voters back out in December? Does Ted Metz getting enough votes hurt or harm your candidate?
I would say the general consensus usually is, I think most people agree, that the Libertarian pulls more from the Republican side. I don't think that's true 100% of the time. I think in 2016 there was some evidence that the Libertarian candidate Gary Johnson may have actually pulled more from Hillary Clinton. Mm-hmm. But 9 out of 10 times, the Libertarian, especially in the statewide race, I think is going to pull from the Republican side. So if it hurts anyone, I think it would be Brian Kemp. And being as that, I think they would also be more likely to support Brian Kemp in a runoff, or possibly likely to not show up at all. A runoff would be interesting because I think we already have a somewhat nationalized race here in Georgia. There's a ton of attention playing out here, but there's also a lot focused on Texas, a lot focused on Florida. There's a lot of important races. If there was a runoff, I don't think there's any other race in this midterm that could go to a runoff. Correct me if I'm wrong there.
Yeah.
But
so a total focus.
Yeah, right. I think you would see a ton of money pour in, a ton of news media attention. I think President Trump would get even more involved. You'd probably have major figures from both parties making public appearances down here. I think it would be a bit of a cluster. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I think most people would prefer that it goes without a runoff. I think that's looking less and less likely. I think we need to start preparing that this could go into December and then become a huge national spotlight on Fox News and CNN, something that you hear talk about every single day, and then it goes to commercial and all you see is their campaign ads. And I think you're right, the Libertarian would play a big role in that. I think there's a Libertarian in most of the constitutional level races. I think one of the only ones there is not is in Jeff Duncan's race,
Lieutenant Governor.
The Lieutenant Governor, and I've heard polls show that he is currently the only Republican poised to win without a runoff. So right? I think that is, kind of a signifier right there, the effect a libertarian can have on the race.
Yeah, talk about turnout, Antoine, because that's obviously that's Abrams' bread and butter, right? Is trying to get people to turn out that maybe weren't turning out in previous elections.
So I would say that it may be true that most of the time, if there's a third-party candidate, most of the people are probably Republicans that are going to be voting for that person. But I would also say that there must be a reason that they wouldn't vote for Brian, and there must be a reason that they wouldn't vote for Stacey. And I do not think, not much, that would be a big difference.
Yeah, my guess is it's not the libertarians.
It's not the
coming back
libertarians
out.
that
It's
are
will
not
the people that already voted for Abrams to come back out.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think that, even for my race in May, my primary, I got 7,358 votes, and
But who's
in my
counting, right?
Exactly.
and in my runoff, I received, I believe it was 3,000 and something. So you can see altogether it was almost 16,000 individuals who voted in the primary for my race, and that's a down ballot race. And then in the runoff, you had only 6,300 and something. So it is much tougher to get people to come back out for a runoff. However, I don't think the libertarian individuals who vote in that race will have any impact whatsoever when it comes to the runoff coming back out. In fact, I hadn't even considered it being a runoff in November. I think that someone's going to win.
Okay.
You have not heard anything about this gentleman. In fact,
I had to just
you haven't heard anything about Mr. Metz. So the only individuals who would vote for him are people who wouldn't vote at all for Stacey or Brian.
Yeah. Before I dovetail into some issues, since we talked about turnout, I would like to talk to you about, Antoine, about that, because if you look at what Stacey Abrams has targeted is to try to increase the turnout, and a big focus of that has been the African American turnout. And when you look at recent elections, the estimates are that there's a million potential African American voters out there that haven't come out and voted in at least the last two cycles. And the Democrat has lost both those elections by between 200,000 and 250,000 votes. So the math says if they get out 30% of that million, not all of them are going to vote Democrat, but you get 35% out, that's going to make a big difference. Are you getting the sense that there is that groundswell in the African American community to come out and vote this time versus 4 or 8 years ago?
I think that we're going to see something that relates to the Doug Jones effect in, was it Alabama?
Alabama special.
But I think that Stacey has been very wise to understand that she will not just be the governor of African Americans.
That's right.
She'll be the governor of all of Georgians.
Yep.
And I think that she's very understanding of that fact. In politics, you do target and make sure that you get your base out. I don't think that we should nullify her to the African American community because she's an African American,
Right.
or the women vote because she's a woman. When she becomes governor, she'll be the governor of all
Georgia.
women, men, transgender, white, black, Chinese, all the above. So I think I don't want to box her into just the African American vote. That's first. The second thing is, I think that there's an energy amongst African Americans that, yes, it is very much so energizing African Americans to get out and participate and vote. It is also opening their eyes to many individuals that may not have voted in the past, that they have the opportunity to, whether it's felons or individuals who don't know whether they can or cannot vote, who felt that they have not been able to vote. It's opened their eyes to other parts of the government, whether you're talking about pardon and paroles or things like that. So, yes, African Americans are energized, but women are energized. White women, white men, black men, all of us are energized. And it's not just because it's Stacey Abrams. I think there are just many policies that are in place that, although, yes, the state has been called number one to do business, you also have to look at our employment rate. You have to look at those individuals who are not benefiting at all from the number one in business. So, and that's not to downgrade or say that business is bad. I am saying that when you look at people and how much they're making in their jobs, are they able to live? Are they able to sustain any kind of lifestyle? Are they able to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps? Do they have boots to pull up, by the way? Those are things that are really talking to individuals who actually have a voice. And I would encourage anyone who does not think they have a voice to still vote. Period.
And I'll jump in here because I think a lot has been made about Stacey Abrams' campaign strategy and trying to activate minority voters, voters that don't normally vote in midterms, and by running as a strong progressive. A little less has been said about that. Brian Kemp has a somewhat novel strategy too, heavily focused on the rural vote. Usually you see Republicans concentrate very heavily on the suburbs, which is kind of the traditional swing vote here in Georgia, but Brian Kemp has really doubled down on the rural vote, tackling rural issues. I think this is the first midterm we've seen in kind of the age of Trump. Trump certainly kind of surprised a lot of people by doing way better than anyone expected in these kind of rural, working class, blue-collar areas, and Brian Kemp is, I think, kind of following up on that, hoping that those voters stay active coming out of 2016, hoping that that's kind of a new voting bloc that the president has activated and think that they maybe stay energized. Yep. There's been a lot of focus throughout 2018 on the suburban voters. People have been saying, this is kind of the election of the suburban college-educated woman voter. But it's interesting because we've got two candidates that are kind of focused not on that. We've got, like I said earlier, a base election in which one is going after these blue-collar, rural voters. All of his advertisements are based around that, and we've got Stacey Abrams, who's trying as hard as she can to bring an entirely new swath of the electorate into play. Mm-hmm. And so that's, I think, is what makes this election a little hard to predict, is you've got two candidates doing their own thing that are both very novel approaches here in Georgia, at least in the last 10, 15 years of elections, and it'll be interesting to see whose strategy plays out better. It's very possible that they both work. We might see tons of new voters coming in, and certainly if early vote totals are already triple what they were in 2014, that could be the effect of both of these candidates trying to reach out to voters that don't always get appealed to, which could end up just meaning that the suburban voters, once again, are the swing vote.
Okay. But to speak to that point as well, we have to look at statistics as well when it comes to that. And you're looking at also statistics in the surrounding counties, which are very rural. Mm-hmm. Whether you look at Effingham County, which has a 364.2% higher turnout rate than in 2014, or in Liberty County, which you all know is very rural, and that's 328.8. We look at Bryan County, 317. Bullitt County, 254.2% higher vote than it was in 2014. These statistics not only speak to the individuals who've been voting in these elections, but now you're talking about African Americans, especially in these rural counties, that have really been written off. Whether they're because they are very much a minority in that community or not, they are turning out to vote.
Well, you're right. I think people, when they think of African American voters in Georgia, they think of Atlanta, they think of Chatham County, but they don't really think about
Augusta,
places
Columbus,
like that. But there are huge numbers of African American voters in the rural areas, especially in South Georgia, and I think that's kind of forgotten about as well.
Yeah. And I think those individuals are being very energized to get out and vote.
There's a lot of question marks, I think, still just almost 10 days out from the election.
One thing from the league standpoint, because we've had this huge voter registration effort going on across the country, and certainly here, we've been very active in it here. Voter registration is at all-time highs.
Right.
So there's going to be huge swaths, as you said, of first-time voters. I mean, they could be high school seniors.
Exactly.
It could be anything. But the people who have either not voted or never registered, because my vote doesn't count. It won't make any difference. I won't feel the difference. It won't change my life. So I'm just going to stay home. Those people are coming out. They're registering. We have been to events at the Civic Center where people were unaware that they could register. It was really kind of astonishing to us. And so they are absolutely energized about this. And even if it came to a runoff, which I agree with you, I don't see a runoff coming. I think somebody's going to win it. But I think this particular race has said so much to the nation, to the world, because it has gotten so much national attention. The Guardian newspaper from London is staked out in Atlanta all this week, for heaven's sakes. Who is Georgia? what does the state of Georgia want to be into the future? And these two candidates stand so far apart that people are going to use that as a signal. And so the people of Georgia want to have a say in that. I think turnout will be at an all-time high, and I think it will tell us a great deal about what this state stands for across the state, not just inside of the perimeter at Atlanta, which is normally what politicians and where most of the politicians come from.
Right, and that also speaks to when individuals were hopping on this thing that Stacey Abrams was getting a lot of money from out of town. Well, there's a lot of people who want her to win. Yeah. And I don't think that, and especially in any races that I've seen, I don't think that money has a boundary when it comes to crossing borders.
Yeah.
Okay? And if that means people, I don't think anybody should be punished or talked about badly just because there are people outside of Georgia who believe in you. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was born to a mother who was on drugs and alcohol and a father who was incarcerated. I could have used that as a way of saying, you know what, I'm going to be out there on drugs. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But no, I wanted a different future, and I don't think that I should be nullified, or anyone who wants a different future for themselves, for their community, for their state, or for their country, to be punished in any way for going after their dreams, going after their goals. That is what Republicans have continuously said to their people, and that is what Democrats are saying, because it's not just about Democrat or Republican. It's about a human nature thing. It's about people wanting the best for themselves. And I made history as the youngest elected official in this county, and the first former foster child to be elected and hold public office in this county. That shouldn't be said that because he got help from people outside. I got friends in Atlanta. I have friends all over the state and in other states. Does that mean that I can't get their help to win or make my dream a reality? When you are a businessman or a businesswoman, you go out and you get investors. You don't go just get investors from the industry that you're trying to get into. You get investors from all over. So why would you try to make someone feel as if they're not Georgian enough, or they're not pro-business or pro-this or whatever, just because they went to California or they went to people who believed in them in New York, and those individuals gave them money for their campaign, to fund their dream, to make a difference? That is something that should not be. Now, and that's on both sides. Whether you are a Democrat or a Republican, you should not be talking about people just because they get money from outside. Find something else. There's way more things that we could talk about than that.
We're going to hit the Buddy Carter-Lisa Ring debate here in just a second, but I'm going to put everybody on the spot since we're talking turnout. The last two midterms, the turnout in Georgia has been about 50%. What do you guys think for a number this year?
What do you think? Election board.
Let's say that one more time.
What do you think turnout's going to be?
Statewide.
Statewide.
Oh, statewide.
Yeah. It's been 50% the last, right around 50%.
I think we're looking at 70.
Wow. 70%. Wow.
I think we're looking at least, I would say 72%.
Okay.
I was going to say slightly over 60, so I'm a little lower than him.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm really optimistic. I'm going 75.
Wow. Excellent.
I mean,
I'm looking at the numbers now.
Yeah. Me too.
The numbers now, and that's including in-person voting. That's not including provisional ballots,
right,
absentee ballots, or things of that nature.
Yeah.
Just looking at the numbers, period, right now,
right,
I look at 72 to 75.
The big part of the early vote is always how much of the election day voting is that cannibalizing? Is it just, are people just voting every election cycle, more and more people vote early? I think that's been the tendency.
Yeah, are they robbing from election day?
Record high early voting every single cycle. So it'll be interesting to see how much election day voting is down, and that I don't think we'll really be able to see where we're at until the election day comes.
Okay. Well, let's talk real quick about Buddy and Lisa Ring. I think most of us would agree that a month or two ago this looked like a race that might not be all that competitive. I know that Buddy is having a fundraiser tonight that it's $500 to just get in the door. It makes you think maybe he's raising some money to make some kind of late push one way or the other. I think that in some of his other forums that people are smelling blood in the water. So I'm wondering, I guess, Stephen, I'll start with you. How much danger is Buddy Carter in?
I spoke with Buddy Carter not too long ago at a different forum that he had, and he said, there's only two ways to run: unopposed and scared. And I think as long as you have an opponent on the ballot, you've got to run as if that person is 10 points ahead of you. And I think any candidate that believes in that will get out there. They're going to try and raise as much money as possible. They're going to talk to as many voters as possible. I think it's good. I never want to see a politician run unopposed. I think that's the best possible scenario, is for even my favorite politicians to have their feet put to the fire. Most of the people I've spoken to at the county level and at the 1st District level aren't too worried about Buddy Carter's race. I think a lot of the money and attention is maybe coming into this race because they want Buddy to put up as much of a fight as possible to drive voters to the poll here, because I think Brian Kemp needs to run up the score here in coastal Georgia, because he's not going to do as well up in the Atlanta areas, and I think they know that, and I think that is where some of the focus is coming in here late, is to try and get a push down here in coastal Georgia to help the statewide candidates. Lisa Rings ran a good campaign. This is a maybe not overwhelmingly Republican district, but it certainly leans pretty heavily Republican, especially with all the rural counties outside of Chatham. And so for a Democrat to even be getting the kind of attention she has gotten speaks to the quality of the campaign she's run. I would not put it on my list of potential flips coming for the blue wave. I could certainly be proved wrong, but I think for the most part, voters see that Buddy has done a good job when it comes to big victories with getting funding for the port, which is huge in the Savannah area.
Absolutely.
So,
and the military. Yep.
And the military, keeping the bases open down here. So he's going to do well in the rural areas. I think in the city of Savannah, which should be Lisa Ring's strongest area, he's got people that recognize how important the port is to the district. I don't think he has much to worry about, but I will credit him for running a strong campaign, even in spite of the fact that he should be well ahead. He's not going to be caught sleeping, is what I'll say.
That's interesting. Antoine?
So I think that Congressman Carter is kind of just now revving up. Pardon me, I don't see him. Because I think that a lot of people underestimated Lisa. They underestimated her. They thought that she was just someone just putting her name out there, just trying to, see what the waters is like. But they underestimated her passion. They underestimated what she stood for. And I think when people underestimate you, that's a great position to be in.
Everybody loves the underdog.
And Congressman Carter probably did the same. He underestimated her. He did not think that she would get as much as she has gotten. I don't know that for sure. I haven't spoken with him in that regard. But to see some of the things that are happening now, the pushing to do this, the pushing to do that, I think when you start seeing that, that means someone's either running scared. And that doesn't mean that someone thinks that this district is going to be flipped. Because we all know that it is. And Lisa came into this knowing how Republican this district is. But that shouldn't scare you. That shouldn't stop you. Because we've seen history. Right. Seats have flipped before. And I think this is not only a referendum for Congressman Carter, it's also a referendum against President Trump. And there are a lot of Republicans who voted for President Trump in the beginning who probably would not vote for him again, only because of some of the things they have seen, some of the things they have witnessed. And if and Congressman Carter has very much so rode the coattail of President Trump in that aspect, and have sung his praises on national TV. So I think that many people who would be upset with President Trump are also not so fond of Congressman Carter. I'm not saying his views are right or wrong. I'm simply saying that because of how the electric is, people who would be upset with President Trump would also be upset with Congressman Carter.
No, I absolutely agree with you, because you've seen a lot of not just congressional races, but
I'm also not saying that all of his views are right, because there are many of them that are wrong.
But you're right that he has seemed to have embraced the president a lot more than some other vulnerable Republicans have, and it may be because he didn't see himself as vulnerable initially. A lot of Republicans have kind of tried to distance themselves, especially those in suburban or potential swing counties, and you're right, Congressman Carter has not done that so far, so it could be interesting to see how that affects him.
Yeah, the protest vote is very interesting to me, because a congressional race, especially one here, so much of what the congressman here does is constituent services and driving to address needs of the district. And I think in large part he has done a yeoman's job of that. But I do think it is really interesting that has Trump alienated enough people that it is actually hurting Buddy? Because we've seen in other areas, Brian Kemp in the runoff for sure. Obviously, you're talking to the base there, where Trump's support and allegiance is rewarded. So it's going to be really interesting to me to see how that breaks down and how much of a role a protest vote plays. While I think a protest vote kind of does a disservice, it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays.
I'm obviously anxious to see what happens at the forum tomorrow night and see how scared he is, not to put too fine a point on it. I agree with you about Lisa Ring, about people underestimating her. She has run an amazing campaign. The army of boots on the street, door-to-door canvassing every single house, every single town, every single county, running a campaign on base camp is absolutely genius, especially when you don't have any money. Mm-hmm. The other thing that she's done that I think is really smart is, I agree with you that in many ways Buddy Carter is running as one of President Trump's boys, right? Yeah. Allies, exactly. And Lisa decided early on, I'm not running against Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's
I'm
true.
running against Buddy Carter. Mm-hmm. And she has never made this about the president, about what is going on nationally. This is a local election, and I'm going to win it locally. And it's just really, really smart of her to do that, especially for a first-time candidate. Mm-hmm. She's run a really, really strong race. I'm glad he's scared. I think that's a healthy thing for any candidate out there. He should know that we're watching and we care about what he does, what he says, what he stands for, and what he'll do in the future. And that's going to win votes more than anything else.
I think if anyone's been to any of his town halls recently, he certainly knows that people are watching after those. I'll also add that this is a great opportunity for Congressman Carter. I think for a long time this region had Jack Kingston and John Barrow, and they were both extremely known qualities in the district. They were people that had been around for forever, had very high profiles within. Everyone knew them personally, it felt like.
Very
and
popular,
Buddy Carter,
too.
very popular, both of them were, I think. Buddy Carter, someone who ran with token opposition his very first time around, had no opposition his first re-election, and this is the first time that he's had kind of a real race. So while a lot of people assume the district is very Republican, it hasn't been tested in a pretty long time, I would say. We've never seen a real race in the first district. And so this gives Congressman Carter a chance to introduce himself to voters as more than just the constituent services side. And so I think ultimately it could be a boon for the congressman, and I think he should be happy. I agree with you. Like I said, I think it's always a good thing for a politician to have an opponent. Yeah. No matter how much I like or plan to vote for that politician, I want their feet put to the fire. Yeah. And so I think this will ultimately be a good thing for the congressman, good thing for the district to have a choice, be able to make a selection, be able to meet the candidates a little bit more, and give Congressman Carter a little bit more of a profile, kind of step out of the shadow and become a more prominent congressman in his own right.
Let me also say that it shouldn't take a candidate who has worked very hard. It shouldn't take that for an incumbent to get out and try to get their name out there, get in front of the constituents. That's something that should have been done and should be being done continuously throughout the term. That isn't something that you do as a way to make up for what you may have not been doing when you finally get someone who's challenging you in a very prominent way. That's first. Second thing is, we ought to not just look at this election. I don't think there are many people who are just looking at this election. We also must be looking at the 2020 election and the importance of state legislatures, especially here in Georgia. When you talk about this district, you're also talking about in 2021, after inaugurations and all that stuff, the census, and you're looking at the legislatures, when they change, if they change. Now you're looking at how the districts could be redrawn. Mm-hmm. So this election is really giving us a test and showing us what is out there. What are we expecting? And if people's infrastructures of the way they're getting people out to vote, if that's the same way that people, if those infrastructures are also used in order to get people to fill out their census forms, we could be seeing a change in how these districts are drawn, which would make this district even less of a Republican district in other districts as well. Yeah. So this isn't just about this election, and I think that's what people should realize. You cannot just look at this election as just a November 6, 2018 election. This is a November 6, this is a 2020, 2021 election. So, and that's the logical part of elections and the importance of of being involved politically. It's not just about who you want in office. It's also about how you want your community shaped, the policies that you want to shape your community, and what you are willing to follow and what you are not willing to follow. And it goes far beyond the year in which you elect the person. It's about the years in which those people are in office.
And I'll defend Congressman Carter real quick. I think in an era in which fewer and fewer congressmen have been willing to do open house town halls, Congressman Carter has always done them since he came into office. I think you've read about a lot of congressmen and women on both sides no longer do those, or have resorted to doing kind of the Skype town hall where they have a pre-selected batch of questions. Congressman Carter, since day one, has been willing to kind of walk into the lion's den and invite anyone that wanted to come in that could fit in the hall to ask any questions they wanted, and he's been willing to answer them. And so I don't think it's necessarily just now that he has an opponent, because he was doing this. If you guys attended the town halls back in 2017 especially, this was well before he had a declared opponent that he was willing to get out there and introduce himself to the district.
And I'm glad
it's one thing to be in those town halls and to host them. It's another thing to actually answer the questions that are asked.
Yeah. And that was interesting that the forums obviously took a while to come together, but now he's looking at what is third in a couple of weeks tomorrow. So unfortunately, I'm getting the signal we're out of time, so let's leave it there. Certainly appreciate this. Has been a great conversation, and if we have a runoff, maybe we'll do it again.
Happy to come back.
Hey, thank you very much for having us.
Yes,
Thank you, and thank you to Service Brewing. We really
Thank you,
appreciate
Service
their
Brewing.
support.
Yes.
We'll get a beer after this.
I'm not drinking.